Billionaire collapses in tears after hearing what girl says about his son. What kind of father forgets to check if his son is happy? It's a hard question, one that hits where it hurts. But sometimes, the people with the biggest homes have the emptiest rooms. Today's story isn't just about wealth or loss. It's about something many people don't talk about: the silence between a father and his child. Not because of hate, but because of absence. In this video, we're going to walk through a story that clears up one thing: money can't pay for missed time. And it shows why sometimes answers don't come from experts or search teams, but from the most unexpected voices. You'll see how a poor girl with nothing in her pocket ended up telling a billionaire the one thing he needed to hear, but never did, and why her words broke him in a way money never could fix. Stick through till the end, because this story isn't just emotional. It might help you understand someone in your life a little better. Regret doesn't knock before it walks in. It just sits there in the chair you always meant to fill. Who was David Blake? No one really knew the man behind the tinted windows. They just called him Mr. Blake. In newspapers, he was a name attached to money. In magazines, he was the man who could turn a failing company into a gold mine. His face showed up next to stock charts and merger headlines. But in person, he rarely spoke more than 5 words at a time. He didn't need to. People moved when he looked at them. At 53, David Blake had everything except peace. His house was big, his cars were silent, and his calendar was always full. Yet, in the middle of that carefully designed life, there was one thing he never fixed: the empty chair at the dinner table. His son, Noah, disappeared 7 years ago during a wilderness camp. It was supposed to be a 3-day survival trip. David had signed the permission slip without reading the fine print. He had a call scheduled during the parent meeting and didn't reschedule. That was his way: business first, everything else second. The last time he saw Noah, the boy had waved from the bus window. David waved back without looking up from his phone. Noah never came home. They searched for 5 days. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers with flashlights and walkie-talkies. Everyone hoped for a headline that would read, "Boy found, safe and smiling." That headline never came. David flew in on the 3rd day, not because he cleared his schedule, but because his assistant told him the media was asking questions. Cameras caught him standing near the forest edge, arms crossed, not speaking. His suit didn't belong there. Neither did his shoes. But he stood anyway, looking but not really seeing. The camp leader had said Noah wandered off during a group hike when it started raining. The trail split, and by the time they realized he was gone, he was already deep in the woods. David had one question: why wasn't anyone watching him? The man didn't answer, just lowered his eyes. When the rescue team stopped after day 6, David didn't say a word. He quietly signed a check to extend the search team another month. Then 2 more. By the end of the year, he had spent millions. Still no sign of Noah. No body, no clue, just silence. He didn't hold a funeral, didn't sell his son's room, didn't open the drawer with Noah's favorite watch in it. Instead, he built another company, bigger, faster, louder. Because if he didn't stop building, maybe the silence couldn't catch him. 7 years later, David Blake returned, not to the camp, but to a small village nearby. No one understood why, not even him. He had been reviewing property paperwork when he saw a familiar name: Sundar Ridge, a quiet area just a few miles from where the search had ended. The land was part of a larger deal his company was closing. He stared at the name for a long time. Something pulled at him, not quite guilt, not quite hope, just something. By the end of the week, he was in a black SUV, window tinted, guarded, tired. The road twisted like it had forgotten where it was going. Mountains on one side, a steep drop on the other. His driver kept glancing in the mirror, unsure why a billionaire needed to come here in person. They passed houses made of tin, shops with painted signs, kids running barefoot. David didn't look out. His eyes stayed on the folder in his lap. It was empty. He just didn't want to meet their eyes. "Stop here," he said suddenly. The car slowed in front of a broken stone path. It led to a clearing with an old tree and nothing else. Not a house, not a name, just a tree. David got out without a word. The wind smelled like dust and smoke. He stood still. Something about this place felt familiar. Not exact, just close, like a memory trying to surface. Then he heard it, a voice, small, soft, talking to someone who wasn't there. The voice came from the other side of the tree. David walked quietly. No security followed. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes, but the girl didn't turn. She was kneeling at the base of the tree, pressing something into the dirt. Small flowers tied with a piece of string. She spoke again, softly. "You'd like this one. It's not perfect, but it smells sweet." David stopped a few steps away. "Who are you talking to?" The girl turned. She was no older than 12. Hair tied back with an old rubber band. Cheeks streaked with dust. She didn't look surprised to see him. She looked calm, like she already knew he was there. "I was talking to Noah," she said. David's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" She stood and brushed her knees. "Noah, the boy who used to sit here. He said if I ever saw his dad, I should say hi." David stared at her. "What's your name?" "Ronnie," she said simply. He looked down at the flowers. One was bent, the others crushed at the edges. But they had been picked with care. David felt the wind shift. The clearing felt heavier now. "You knew my son?" "Yes," she said. "He helped me fix my shoes. Then he taught me how to read." David couldn't speak. Ronnie picked up a folded piece of paper from the base of the tree. She held it out. "I still have this. He drew it for me." David didn't take it. Not yet. He couldn't. His hands stayed at his sides. His breathing slowed. And for the first time in years, he listened. David stood frozen, the folded paper trembling slightly in Ronnie's hands. The dirt and dust had softened the edges of the paper, but it was unmistakable. The cover had a crude drawing of a tree, and inside, the pages were filled with childish handwriting and sketches. "It's Noah's diary," Ronnie said softly. "He gave it to me before he left." David's heart tightened. 7 years of silence, unanswered questions, and now a piece of his son, held in the hands of a poor girl he barely knew existed. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the paper. The pages felt fragile, but the words inside were sharp and clear. The diary was more than just drawings or notes. It was Noah's world, the things he saw, the people he met, the feelings he couldn't say out loud. David sat on the cracked stone nearby, careful not to disturb the quiet around them. He opened the first page. "Today I met Ronnie. She has the brightest smile I've ever seen," one entry began. As he read, the world around him seemed to quiet further. Noah wasn't just lost in the woods or forgotten in a camp. He had found something, someone to care about. Page after page, Noah wrote about his days with Ronnie. The stories of small adventures, chasing a stray dog, fixing a broken wheelbarrow, sharing meals made from wild fruits. There were drawings of the village, the river, and the tree where they met. Some pages had scrawled notes in the margins, like "Wish Dad was here," or "Don't be mad at me." David swallowed hard. The boy he thought he'd lost was alive somewhere in these pages, alive in memories and in moments David had never known. Ronnie sat beside him, quiet but steady. "He wanted you to see this," she said. David nodded, tears threatening but held back by years of habit. He realized this diary wasn't just a gift, it was a message. A message that Noah had lived, that he had cared, that even in silence, he had found a way to reach out. The sun was beginning to dip behind the mountain ridges, painting the sky in a quiet shade of orange and pink. David and Ronnie sat under the big tree where she had been visiting Noah's memory for years. The diary lay open between them, but now it was time to hear the stories, the ones that no pages could fully capture. Ronnie folded her hands in her lap and looked up, her eyes clear despite the tiredness in her small frame. "You want to know about Noah?" she asked softly. David nodded. For years, he had held onto the idea of his son as a boy lost and alone, but Ronnie's presence challenged that empty picture. She took a deep breath and began. "Noah was the kindest boy I ever knew," she said, voice steady but full of feeling. "He wasn't like the other kids in the village. Not because he had more money or better clothes. He was different because he listened. David leaned in, his arms resting on his knees, waiting. Once my dog broke his leg chasing a rabbit, Ronnie went on. I was so scared. Noah found some herbs, and he made a bandage. He stayed with my dog all night. Her words painted a picture of a boy David had never truly met. Not the son who waved goodbye from a bus window, but a boy who cared deeply, who stayed up through the night to help. He never showed off, she added quickly. He didn't want people to think he was better than them. But when I was sad or scared, he was always there. David's throat tightened. This was the side of his son he had never seen, hidden beneath layers of his own business deals and long working hours. Ronnie looked down at the ground and then back at David. He taught me how to read, too. He was patient, even when I messed up the letters. David smiled faintly. The idea of his son helping a poor village girl learn to read was so simple, yet so powerful. The village was hard for him at first, Ronnie said. He missed his city, but then he found a family here. Not the kind with gold, but the kind with hearts. She paused, eyes glistening. Noah didn't want to go back because he was afraid you'd be angry, that you didn't care. David closed his eyes. That sentence hit harder than anything else. All these years, he thought his son had vanished. But maybe, just maybe, Noah had run away not from the forest, but from the silence between them. Thank you for telling me, David said quietly. I never knew. Ronnie smiled, a little shy now. I'm glad you came. Noah wanted you to know. The wind whispered through the branches above them. David felt a small shift inside, like a door cracked open after years sealed shut. And for the first time since Noah disappeared, he allowed himself to hope. Not for finding his son, but for understanding him. The pages of the diary seemed to hold an entire world that David had never been part of. As he flipped slowly through the worn sheets, the voices and laughter of his son echoed faintly in his mind. Ronnie watched him closely. There's something else, she said, voice soft but sure. Noah wrote about you, about us. David looked up, curiosity mixed with a hesitant hope. About me? She nodded. He wasn't angry, not really. He just felt lonely. Opening the diary again, David found a section marked with a torn piece of red cloth, Noah's way of drawing attention to something important. The handwriting was messy, hurried, but clear enough. Dad works all the time. I miss him. Sometimes I think he doesn't see me, but I still love him. I want him to be proud. I wish he could know how much I need him. David's breath caught. It wasn't the anger or blame he expected. It was a child's quiet plea for love. Ronnie pointed to another page. And this one. It was a sketch of a tall man standing alone, surrounded by walls taller than he was. The figure looked small, isolated. Noah said you were like a giant castle, Ronnie explained. Big and strong but far away. David closed the diary gently, overwhelmed by the honesty. He had built walls around himself, not just in his life, but around his son too. For the first time, he understood the distance wasn't just physical. It was something deeper. Ronnie smiled faintly. He wanted to come home, but he didn't know how. David's eyes filled with tears. And now, she said, you're here. The weight of those words settled between them. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a beginning. David folded the diary carefully. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, he wasn't walking it alone. The sun was low now, casting long shadows across the village clearing. David sat beside Ronnie under the old tree, the diary closed gently on his lap. The air was still, yet his mind was racing with the memories and stories he had just learned. For years, he had built a wall of silence around his grief. Work had been his escape, the empire his shield. But here, in this quiet place, with a simple girl who had never known his wealth, the truth was laid bare. I wasn't the father he needed, David finally said, voice rough. I thought providing was enough. Money, gifts, security, but I forgot to be there, to listen. Ronnie looked at him thoughtfully. He knew you loved him, but love isn't just things. It's time, it's moments. Noah waited for those moments. David nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the cracked earth beneath the tree. The memories of missed birthdays, canceled trips, and missed bedtime stories pressed down on him. He didn't want you to blame yourself, Ronnie continued gently. He wanted you to know he forgave you. The words struck deep. Forgiveness from the one he thought he had failed. David's shoulders sagged. The weight of guilt, the years of regret, seemed to press him down. But alongside that weight, something new stirred, a flicker of hope. The hope that he could still make things right, even if only in memory. I don't want to be just a shadow in his story, David said, voice firmer now. I want to be the father he believed I could be. Ronnie smiled softly. Then start now. Be here. Listen. Remember. David reached out, placing a hand on the diary. I'm ready to listen. For the first time in years, David felt the silence between them begin to heal. The evening settled slowly over the village. The fading light cast a soft golden hue on the scattered homes and narrow paths worn smooth by generations of footsteps. David Blake sat beneath the great tree with Ronnie, the diary resting between them like a fragile bridge connecting two worlds, his past and the present. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ronnie began to speak again, her voice carrying the weight of memory and loss, yet threaded with warmth. There are things Noah wanted you to know, things he never had the chance to say. David nodded, leaning in closer, eager to hear what his son's closest friend could reveal. The truth felt like a distant beacon, flickering but not yet extinguished. Ronnie's eyes held a quiet sadness as she continued. Noah wasn't just lost in the forest. He stayed here, in this village, longer than anyone knew. But it wasn't easy for him. He was different, always wondering where he belonged. She paused, searching David's face for a flicker of recognition or understanding. When she found none, she pressed on. He was brave, yes, but also scared. He missed you, even when he was angry. He wanted to go home, but something held him back. He didn't know how to face you, or maybe he was afraid you wouldn't understand. David swallowed hard, the lump in his throat growing heavier. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the weight of her words silenced him. Ronnie folded her hands in her lap and sighed. The last year before he died, he helped the village in ways no one expected. He was kind to everyone, especially the children. When the flood came, Noah was the first to help build shelters and find safe places. He never asked for thanks. He just wanted to help. Tears welled in David's eyes as he imagined his son, the boy he never truly knew, quietly becoming a hero in a place far from the life he'd imagined for him. He died helping others, Ronnie said softly. The whole village mourned him like a brother. We buried him under this tree, the one he loved most. David looked up at the towering branches above, now dark against the night sky. His heart ached with a mixture of pride, sorrow, and regret. The son he thought he lost had found a way to live and die on his own terms. For hours, they sat in silence, the diary between them whispering stories of courage, forgiveness, and love beyond words. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. I never knew this. I never saw this. Ronnie reached out and gently touched his hand. He wanted you to know, and now you do. David closed his eyes, feeling the burden of years lift slightly. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt the stirrings of something precious, connection. The village lanterns flickered in the distance as the night deepened. And beneath the tree, a father and a friend shared the story of a boy who found light in the darkest places. The village lay quiet beneath the stars as David Blake sat alone beneath the large tree that marked Noah's final resting place. The diary was closed beside him, but the words inside were alive in his mind. It had been hours since Ronnie left to check on her family, and David found himself grappling with a flood of emotions. For years, he had buried himself in work and wealth, convinced that success was enough. But now, beneath the vast night sky, he understood how empty that life had been without connection. He realized the gulf between him and his son had not just been physical, it was emotional, a chasm he hadn't dared to cross. Memories of Noah's childhood flooded back. The boy who once clumsily learned to ride a bike, who had asked endless questions about stars and rivers, who had once proudly shown off his first drawing of a tree. David saw now how much he had missed, moments he had dismissed as trivial. The diary's pages revealed more than just a boy's thoughts. They showed a soul seeking love, understanding, and acceptance. Noah's courage, his kindness, his desire to help others, even in his last days, stood in stark contrast to David's own isolation. David's heart ached with regret, but beneath that ache was a spark, a determination to change. He knew it was too late to undo the past, but not too late to honor his son's memory by embracing the lessons Noah left behind. As dawn approached, David made a decision. He would no longer be the man who hid behind walls of wealth and silence. He would return to the village, not as a billionaire, but as a father willing to listen, to learn, and to heal. With the first light, David rose from beneath the tree and looked toward the village. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was a path he was ready to take, one step at a time. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 11 now? For point 1 mini, you said. 11 SE Lakar 20 Chapter TK Sob Chapter Leak, Do, ACI, E Formate Main. ChatGPT said. Understood. I will now write chapters 11 through 20 in the same detailed, natural, and emotionally rich style, each chapter fully developed with 1,000 plus words, maintaining consistency with chapters 1 to 10. I'll prepare the chapters and provide them sequentially. Here is Chapter 11 to start. Chapter 11, Returning Home. David's footsteps were heavy as he walked through the narrow streets of the village. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke from cooking fires. The villagers noticed him but said nothing. Some stared openly, others whispered quietly. This wasn't the man they read about in the papers, not the ruthless businessman or the man who seemed untouchable. This was a man who carried years of silence and sorrow in his eyes. David wasn't sure where to go first. The village was simple, yet every corner held a memory of Noah. He spotted a small group of children playing near a stream, barefoot, laughing freely. One of them stopped and looked at David. Recognition flickered. Slowly, David approached. "Hello," he said softly. The children eyed him warily. A woman nearby smiled gently and nodded. "You are Noah's father." David nodded, voice breaking slightly. "I am." They led him to a small house where Ronnie and her family lived. Inside, the walls were bare but clean. Simple food was laid out on a wooden table. Ronnie greeted him with a shy smile. David sat down, the weight of years pressing on him. He spoke little, but listened more. Stories of Noah's kindness, his laughter, his dreams. Words he never heard before. For the first time, David felt like he belonged somewhere that wasn't a boardroom or a skyscraper. He wasn't just a visitor. He was a father trying to heal. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Ronnie's modest home, casting a warm glow across the simple wooden floor. David woke slowly, a new kind of heaviness on his chest, not from sorrow or regret, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being somewhere that wasn't filled with marble and glass walls. Instead, he was surrounded by the sounds of village life, the laughter of children, the calls of birds, and the gentle murmur of neighbors greeting one another. David sat quietly on the small cot, staring out the window at the dusty road winding through the village. The world here was so different from the one he had left behind. No endless meetings, no flashing screens, no deadlines or press conferences. Here, time seemed to move slower, but it was filled with a kind of meaning he had never known. Ronnie entered the room with a basket of freshly picked vegetables, smiling gently. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, careful not to disrupt the quiet. David nodded, forcing a smile. "Good morning." The day ahead was unplanned, a blank page in his life. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be led by the rhythm of the village, not by the ticking of a clock or the demands of a boardroom. Ronnie took him by the hand and led him outside. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. They walked past rows of small homes made from stone and wood, children running barefoot and chasing each other with joyous abandon. "Do you want to meet the others?" Ronnie asked. David hesitated, but then nodded. The thought of meeting people who had been part of his son's life, people who had seen a side of Noah he never had, filled him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. They arrived at a small open area where several villagers had gathered. Some worked on weaving baskets, others tended to small gardens. When the villagers saw David, they paused their work and offered nods of greeting, some with smiles, others with quiet curiosity. An elderly woman approached, her face lined with years of hard work, but her eyes bright and kind. "You are Noah's father," she said simply. David bowed his head. "Yes, I am." She reached out and touched his arm gently. Noah was a good boy, kind and brave. We all miss him. David's throat tightened. He swallowed hard, unable to speak. Over the next hours, David listened to stories he had never heard before. Stories of Noah's laughter echoing through the village, of his gentle hands helping to build homes and mend fences, of the way he had shared his knowledge, teaching children how to read from tattered books, how to care for animals, how to dream beyond their circumstances. Each story was a thread weaving David closer to the son he thought he had lost forever. Ronnie watched quietly as David absorbed every word. "Noah wanted you to know these things," she said finally. "Even if you couldn't be here, he wanted you to see the world he found." David nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. For the first time, he felt connection, not just to his son, but to a community that had become his son's family. As evening fell, David sat by the fire with Ronnie and the villagers, sharing a simple meal. The crackling flames illuminated faces filled with warmth and acceptance. David felt something shift inside him, a slow opening of a heart long closed. He realized that this village, these people, and this little girl who had brought him here were part of his own healing. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was becoming a part of a story greater than himself. The dawn brought with it a soft, gentle light that bathed the village in warmth. David woke early, feeling the unfamiliar but calming sounds of the village greeting the new day. The smell of wood smoke and earth seeped through the open window, carrying a sense of life that was both simple and profound. He found himself restless but eager to understand more, to see more, to be part of this world his son had called home. This wasn't a trip for business or prestige. It was a journey to a place where time moved with heartbeats and where actions spoke louder than words. Ronnie was already outside, tending to a small garden near her home. The bright green leaves of the plants reached for the sun, resilient and patient. She smiled when she saw David approach. "Come, I want to show you something," she said. David followed her down a narrow dirt path lined with wildflowers. Children were already playing nearby, their laughter ringing clear and bright in the morning air. They stopped in front of a modest wooden building. It wasn't much, a few walls held together with love and effort, but it was the village school, where Noah had spent many afternoons teaching Ronnie and others to read and write. Inside, the walls were adorned with drawings and letters, some faded from years of sun and wind. The smell of old paper and chalk filled the air. Ronnie took David's hand gently and led him to a corner where a small, worn desk sat. On it lay a book, a collection of Noah's handwritten lessons and stories, bound together with string. "This is what he left behind," Ronnie explained softly. "He wanted every child here to have a chance." David traced the faded letters with his fingers, feeling the weight of his son's dreams. Here was proof that Noah had cared deeply, not just for Ronnie, but for the entire village. He looked up at Ronnie. "He gave you this." She nodded. He believed knowledge was the key to freedom. He said, "If you can read, you can be anything." David felt a lump rise in his throat. The boy he thought he had lost had left behind a legacy not of wealth, but of hope. That day, David joined the villagers in their daily tasks. He helped carry water, mend fences, and share stories with the children. He felt the sting of humility, realizing how far removed he had been from the simple truths of life. No longer the billionaire shielded by walls. He was a man learning to listen, to serve, and to connect. When evening came, David sat by the fire with the villagers, the crackling flames reflecting in his eyes. He shared his own stories, not of money or success, but of mistakes, regrets, and a desire to change. The villagers listened with open hearts. For the first time, David felt truly seen, not as a man of wealth, but as a father trying to find his way. As the stars appeared overhead, David whispered a silent promise to live the lessons Noah had taught and to never forget the power of humility and love. The morning sun poured over the village, casting long shadows and bathing everything in golden light. David Blake woke to the sounds of roosters crowing and children playing nearby. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh earth and cooking fires. As he sat outside Ronnie's modest home, David reflected on the days that had passed since he arrived. Each conversation, each story, had chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. The walls of pride, guilt, and regret. Today, however, felt different. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, as if the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something important. Ronnie approached, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her eyes were steady, her expression calm. "This is for you," she said, offering the bundle. David accepted it, curiosity stirring beneath his careful composure. Inside, he found a simple wooden box, worn smooth by years of handling. He opened it slowly, revealing a collection of letters and notes, handwritten by Noah. Each letter was carefully folded, edges yellowed with age. David's fingers trembled as he unfolded the first one. The handwriting was unmistakable, his son's own. The words inside were raw and honest, filled with emotions David had never imagined. Hope, sadness, anger, but most of all, forgiveness. One letter began, "Dad, I know I wasn't always easy to understand. I missed you more than you think, but I forgive you. I want you to forgive yourself too." David's breath hitched. Forgiveness. The word echoed in his mind like a soft melody, gentle but powerful. Ronnie sat beside him, waiting quietly. Another letter spoke of Noah's dreams for the village, his hopes for education and peace. There were sketches of the school, the tree where they had met, and notes about the people he loved. Reading each word, David felt his heart unravel. The man who had been so distant and broken was now finding a way back, not just to his son, but to himself. Tears spilled freely as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Noah. I'm so sorry." Ronnie reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture that carried the weight of healing and understanding. "Your son gave you a gift," she said softly, "the gift of forgiveness. Now it's your turn." David looked up, his eyes meeting hers. In that moment, he realized that forgiveness was not a destination, but a journey, a path he was ready to walk. The village around them hummed with life, and beneath the vast sky, a father and daughter found peace in the promise of a new beginning. The morning light filtered softly through the leaves of the great tree, casting dancing shadows on the small clearing below. David Blake stood there, the diary and letters from Noah still heavy in his pocket, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. The village was waking up around him, women preparing food over open fires, children running and laughing as they chased each other across the dusty roads, and men tending to their daily chores. The rhythm of life here was simple, unhurried, and grounded. David took a deep breath and looked at Ronnie, who was standing nearby, watching him with a quiet smile. Today marked the first step in what would become a new chapter, not just for himself, but for the village that had become his son's second home. He had made a decision. The company back home could wait. The meetings, the deals, the endless pursuit of profit, none of it mattered if he could not honor Noah's memory in the way he truly deserved. Together with Ronnie and the villagers, David began to talk about building something lasting. A school, a place where children could learn not just to read and write, but to dream. A place where the walls would be low and open, welcoming everyone without barriers. The work was hard. The village lacked resources, and progress was slow. But each stone laid, each plank nailed, was a step toward healing. David found himself working alongside villagers he had never imagined meeting, much less respecting. They taught him humility, patience, and the power of community. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, David paused to watch a group of children learning beneath the shade of the tree. Their faces were bright with curiosity and hope, and for the first time, he felt a connection that went beyond grief. Noah's legacy was alive in those smiles. The days passed slowly in the village, each one a lesson in patience and transformation. David Blake, the man once ruled by deadlines and decisions made in glass towers, found himself submerged in a world far removed from his previous life. Here, the pace was dictated by the sun's journey across the sky and the season's gentle rhythms, not by ringing phones or flashing screens. Every morning, he woke early to the sounds of roosters and children's laughter. He learned to greet neighbors by name, to carry water from the well without complaint, and to sit quietly in the evenings, listening to stories shared around the fire. These simple acts, once foreign and uncomfortable, became anchors in his journey toward healing. But change was not easy. The walls he had built over years of grief and guilt did not crumble overnight. There were moments when the weight of regret pressed down so heavily that he could barely breathe. In those moments, the memory of Noah's letters, the forgiveness and hope within them, became his lifeline. One afternoon, as David helped clear land for the new school, his hands blistered and muscles aching, he paused to watch the village children playing nearby. Their laughter was a balm to his soul, a reminder that life continued even in the face of loss. Yet, the ache of absence lingered. Ronnie approached, carrying a small bundle of wildflowers. "You're doing well," she said softly. "Noah would be proud." David smiled, the first genuine smile in a long time. "I hope so," he replied. "I'm trying to be the man he believed I could be." That evening, under a sky painted with stars, David sat alone by the tree where Noah was buried. The breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying the scents of earth and fire. He whispered a silent promise to his son, a vow to carry forward the lessons learned, to live a life worthy of the love he had been shown. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, David felt the weight of change settling into something hopeful, something real. The early morning sun spilled its golden light over the village, awakening the earth and the people with a gentle warmth. David Blake woke to the soft chorus of roosters' birdsong and the distant murmur of the river flowing nearby. The air was fresh, tinged with the scents of wet soil and blooming flowers. So different from the sterile city air he was used to, yet it felt more alive. This was no longer just a place to visit. It had begun to feel like home. David rose slowly from his cot inside Ronnie's simple home, the wooden floor cool beneath his feet. The house was modest, bare walls, a few wooden stools, a small clay stove, but it held a warmth that no mansion ever could. Here, life was measured by shared stories, work done together, and the quiet comfort of community. As he stepped outside, children ran past, chasing a stray dog, their laughter ringing clear and bright. David smiled, a feeling he hadn't known for years bubbling up inside him. Ronnie was already outside, tending the small garden beside the house. The bright green leaves of the vegetables and herbs reached toward the sun. She looked up and waved him over. "Good morning," she said softly. David nodded, his voice catching slightly. "Good morning." Together, they walked toward the village center, a clearing shaded by ancient trees, where the villagers gathered for meetings, celebrations, and simple conversation. Today was special. It was the day they would plant the first tree in the new schoolyard, a symbol of growth, hope, and legacy. Villagers bustled about, preparing for the ceremony. Women cooked over open fires, men built benches from rough-hewn logs, and children decorated the area with handmade banners. The energy was palpable. David felt a hand slip into his. It was Ronnie, steady and sure. "Are you ready?" she asked. He took a deep breath. More than ever. As the sun climbed higher, the village gathered around the empty patch of earth destined to become the schoolyard. David stood at the center, looking out at the faces of those who had welcomed him, shared their stories, and taught him lessons no book or boardroom ever could. With the help of a few strong hands, David knelt and began to dig, the earth soft beneath his fingers. The villagers joined him, working side by side. As the hole grew deeper, David felt the weight of years lifting, replaced by something new, a sense of purpose. When the time came to place the young sapling into the earth, David held it carefully, cradling its fragile branches. The tree was small, but its roots promised strength and growth. "Today we plant more than a tree," David said, voice steady but filled with emotion. "We plant hope. We plant a future for this village, for our children, and for those who will come after us." The crowd nodded, some wiping tears, others smiling broadly. As the last handful of soil covered the roots, David looked up at the sky. The breeze carried the scent of earth and promise. For the first time in a long time, David felt whole. The morning dawned quietly over the village, gentle light spilling across the fields and homes. David Blake woke to the familiar sounds of life stirring, the soft footsteps of children, the clatter of pots as breakfast was prepared, and the distant crow of a rooster greeting the new day. As he sat on the small wooden bench outside Ronnie's house, the memories of the past weeks weighed heavily on his heart. The journey from a wealthy, distant father to a man fully immersed in the life his son had embraced had been more difficult than he'd ever imagined. The village had changed him, but old wounds ran deep. Guilt, regret, and sorrow often returned in the quiet moments when he was alone. He thought about the times he had missed, birthdays, school plays, bedtime stories, and the empty chair at the table that had haunted him for years. But the village had also shown him another path, a way to face those wounds and begin healing. Ronnie approached with a basket of freshly picked herbs. Her eyes held a quiet kindness that comforted David more than words ever could. She sat beside him without speaking, offering companionship in silence. "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" David asked, breaking the stillness. Ronnie nodded slowly. "Every day. It's the hardest thing to give, but also the most freeing." David looked out at the horizon where the sun painted the sky with hues of pink and gold. "I've struggled with forgiving myself. How could I forgive a man who missed so much, who wasn't there when it mattered?" Ronnie smiled softly. "Your son forgave you. He wanted you to find peace, not pain." The words settled over David like a bomb. He realized that holding on to guilt only deepened the wounds. Together, they walked to the small schoolyard where the new tree was beginning to take root. The sapling stood tall and fragile, a symbol of hope and growth. David knelt and touched the earth around the roots. "I want to grow like this tree," he said quietly, "to heal, to reach out, and to live in a way that honors Noah." Ronnie placed her hand over his. "And you will." The village around them was alive with possibility. David understood that healing wasn't a destination, but a journey, one he was ready to take, step by step, with patience and love. The air was cool as the sun began its slow climb over the horizon. David Blake stood once more beneath the sprawling branches of the tree, where Noah had been laid to rest. The village around him was waking up, the morning chorus of birdsong blending with the laughter of children and the quiet bustle of daily life. But here, in this moment, David was alone with his thoughts. The weight of the past years pressed on him, but alongside it grew something new, a fragile seed of hope, planted deep within his heart. He thought of the letters, the diary, the stories Ronnie had shared. Each was a thread weaving a tapestry of his son's life, a life filled with love, courage, and forgiveness. A life that had changed a village and was now changing him. David knelt, pressing his hand to the earth. "Noah," he whispered, "I promise to carry your legacy, to be the father you needed, even if it's too late for me to be the father you wanted." The promise was not made to erase the past, but to honor it, to transform regret into purpose, silence into song. As the village stirred to life, David stood and looked toward the path leading away from the tree. Ahead lay the future, uncertain, challenging, but filled with the possibility of healing and connection. With steady steps, he began to walk, ready to embrace the journey ahead. The first light of dawn painted the sky with soft hues of pink and gold as David Blake stood at the edge of the village. The journey he had begun weeks ago, walking through the shadows of his past and into the light of understanding, was far from over. Yet, in this quiet moment, he felt the stirrings of peace within. Behind him lay the village, a place of humble homes, strong hearts, and a new family he had never expected to find. Here, he had learned that wealth was not measured by money, but by connection, that true strength lay in vulnerability, and that healing was possible even for the deepest wounds. He took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling his lungs, and looked ahead. The path wound through the forest, winding and uncertain, much like the journey of a father seeking forgiveness and love. David began to walk, each step steady and purposeful. The weight of years of regret and silence was still there, but it no longer held him captive. Instead, it fueled his resolve to live differently, to honor Noah's memory by embracing the life he had left to live. As he walked, memories of his son filled his mind, the laughter, the kindness, the small acts of courage. He carried them with him like a torch, lighting the way. The road was long and the destination unclear, but David was no longer afraid. He had found the strength to face the past and the hope to build a future. With each step forward, he moved closer to healing, closer to the son he loved, and closer to the man he hoped to become.